Welcome back to AKHARA Study. Today, we're unpacking a core piece of the Class 12 syllabus, the story Three Questions, written by the legendary Russian author Leo Tolstoy. Tolstoy is known globally for his massive, complex novels, but he also dedicated deep intellectual labor to short, powerful parables. He used these stories to tackle massive philosophical ideas using very simple frameworks. In this story, we follow a certain Tsar, a Russian ruler, who develops a theory. He believes that if he can master three specific variables, he will be perfectly optimized and never fail in any undertaking. The Tsar needs to know three things. First, what is the right time to begin every action? Second, who are the right people to listen to? And third, what is the most important thing to do? To find the answers, the Tsar broadcasts a massive reward across his kingdom. Predictably, learned men flood the palace, but their advice is a chaotic mess. For the question of timing, some scholars tell the Tsar to draw up strict daily schedules, while others insist he needs to consult magicians who can predict the future. The answers to the other two questions are just as fractured. Some argue the most necessary people are doctors, while others advocate for warriors. For the most important action, the scholars debate whether the Tsar should focus purely on scientific study, mastery in warfare, or religious worship. This overwhelming noise yields absolutely no clarity. The Tsar agrees with none of them. Realizing that the kingdom's brightest minds cannot give him a straight answer, he leaves the court entirely to seek out a solitary hermit living deep in the woods, known only for his raw wisdom. To meet the hermit, the Tsar strips away all traces of his royal power. He dismounts his horse, orders his elite bodyguards to stay behind, and puts on the simple clothes of a commoner before walking into the trees alone. He finds the hermit in a small clearing, digging garden beds in the dirt. The old man is physically frail. With every thrust of the heavy spade into the earth, he breathes heavily, offering the Tsar only a brief greeting before returning to his silent labor. The Tsar explains his three questions, but gets no response. Seeing the old man struggling, the Tsar steps forward, takes the heavy spade from his hands, and starts doing the brutal physical work himself. Time passes relentlessly. 1 hour bleeds into another. The sun begins to sink behind the trees. The Tsar continues to dig, and the hermit still refuses to utter a single word of advice. Finally, the Tsar reaches his breaking point. He drives the spade into the dirt and demands a straight answer. If the wise man has nothing to teach him, he states he will simply go home. But before the hermit has to answer, the quiet standoff in the woods is violently interrupted. A bearded man stumbles out of the trees, running blindly. He collapses onto the ground, fainting, his hands pressed tightly against a massive, actively bleeding wound in his stomach. The Tsar immediately drops his intellectual frustration and springs into action. He unfastens the stranger's clothing and works frantically to wash the wound, repeatedly wringing out soaked bandages until the bleeding finally stops. As the sun fully sets and the air turns cold, the Tsar helps carry the wounded man inside the hut. Completely exhausted from the long walk, the manual labor of digging, and the intense medical triage, the Tsar collapses on the threshold and sleeps deeply through the night. Morning brings a lethal revelation. The wounded stranger wakes up and confesses his true identity. He is a sworn enemy of the Tsar, who had waited in the woods to ambush and assassinate him, only to be discovered and nearly killed by the royal bodyguards left at the edge of the forest. The math of the situation becomes immediately clear. By pausing his search for intellectual answers to perform a physical act of mercy, the Tsar unknowingly neutralized a mortal threat. The assassin, moved by the Tsar saving his life, pledges his loyalty and asks for forgiveness. With peace established, the Tsar steps outside the hut. He finds the hermit on his knees, planting seeds in the very beds they dug the day before. The Tsar begs one final time for the answers to his three questions. The hermit looks up at the Tsar and delivers the core message of the story. The Tsar's own actions over the past 24 hours have already answered his questions perfectly. Look at the sequence of events. If the Tsar had not pitied the hermit's weakness and stayed to dig those beds, he would have walked straight back into the assassin's ambush. In that phase, the most important time was while he was digging. The most important person was the hermit, and the most important action was helping him. When the bleeding man arrived, the variables shifted entirely. If the Tsar hadn't focused on bandaging the wounds, the man would have died, and they never would have reconciled. So in that phase, the most important person became the injured man, and the most important action was saving him. The hermit distills this down to 3 concrete rules. First, the right time to begin any action is simply now. It is the only moment where anyone possesses actual power to affect the outcome. Second, the most necessary person is whoever you are currently with, because the future is completely unpredictable. And third, the most important thing to do is to do that person good. The Tsar found his certainty not by predicting the future, but by acting correctly in the present. Thanks for watching AKHARA Study. If this helped you tackle your Class 12 English syllabus, hit the like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, share this video with your classmates, and subscribe for more complete story breakdowns.